Downtown Los Angeles at 3 in the afternoon smelled like stale smog, cheap takeout, and broken dreams. It was a scent I was used to, a harsh reality that grounded me after the absolute disaster of the past week. What I wasn't used to was the heavy, suffocating wave of alpha pheromones rolling under my crappy apartment door. Cedar and smoke, rain and steel, earth and storm, leather and gunpowder. Oh, you have got to be kidding me, I muttered, freezing halfway between the tiny kitchenette and the living room. My own scent peaches and brown sugar instantly soured with a spike of defensive anger. Derek, who was still nursing a healing broken arm and a bruised ego on my thrift store couch, sat up straight. Eli, what is it? Before I could answer, the floorboards vibrated. Outside my third-floor window, the aggressive purr of not one but 4 V8 engines cut through the city noise. I peeked through the dusty blinds. 4 matte black SUVs were parked illegally on the curb, looking like a heavily armed funeral procession in the middle of a gang territory. Don't answer it, Derek said, his voice dropping into a protective growl. He awkwardly grabbed an aluminum baseball bat with his good hand, looking like a battered golden retriever trying to fight off a pack of wolves. I'll kill them. I swear to God, Eli, I'll bash their skulls in. Put the bat down, Derek. You look pathetic. I sighed, though my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. 3 sharp knocks hit the door. It wasn't a request, it was a demand wrapped in forced politeness. My omega hindbrain screamed at me to submit to open the door and bare my throat to the sheer power radiating from the hallway. I shoved that instinct down, locked my knees, and yanked the door open. They looked ridiculous. 4 massive, deadly alphas crammed into the narrow, peeling hallway of a low-rent apartment building. Lincoln stood at the front, his custom suit looking entirely too expensive for a zip code where people got mugged for their sneakers. Harrison was behind him, eyes calculating the structural integrity of my ceiling. Wyatt stood silently in the back, practically blocking out the light, while Jackson looked like he was one harsh word away from a total mental breakdown. "What do you want?" I asked, crossing my arms. I didn't invite them in. Eli, Lincoln started his deep voice, doing that awful rumbling thing that made my spine tingle. "We need to talk." "We have nothing to talk about. You gave me a $50,000 severance package and kicked me out. Transaction complete." "We were wrong," Jackson blurted out, pushing past Harrison. His scent, usually sharp and energetic, was dull with raw misery. "We messed up, Eli. God, we messed up so badly. The house is dead without you." I glared at him, though my chest gave a traitorous ache. "I am not your therapist, Jackson. And I am definitely not your housekeeper anymore." "We don't want a housekeeper," Harrison interjected smoothly, slipping a thick ivory envelope from his jacket. "We want a partner, a legal one to be exact." I stared at the envelope, then at Lincoln. "Explain. Fast." "We're sending Mason and Carter to Starlight Academy in Beverly Hills," Lincoln said, his jaw tightening. "It's the best preschool on the West Coast, secure, elite, private. But their admissions board is notoriously traditional. They require a family interview, a home visit." I let out a harsh, bitter laugh. "And you think 4 single, terrifying men who run a shady security empire and smell like fresh murder are going to pass a Beverly Hills vibe check?" "Exactly," Harrison said, ignoring my sarcasm. "Which is why we need you, not as an employee, as our Omega, the boy's step-parent on paper. We need you to come back to Bel Air and help us play the part of a normal, stable American family." "You want me to fake marry a pack of alphas to scam a preschool?" I asked, my voice rising in disbelief. "I'll break your legs," Derek yelled from the couch, waving the bat weakly. Wyatt finally spoke, his dark eyes locking onto mine. "They haven't eaten properly in 3 days, Eli." The world stopped. My breath hitched, the angry retort dying on my tongue. "What?" Lincoln pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, and held it out to me. The video call connected immediately. "Eli." The small, fragile voice coming from the speaker shattered every ounce of resolve I had. Mason's face filled the screen, his dark eyes wide and red-rimmed. Behind him, Carter was clutching a stuffed dinosaur, looking so pale and small. "Hi, Bugs," I whispered, my voice cracking. My Omega instincts flared so violently I almost snatched the phone from Lincoln's hand. "Papa Lincoln said he went to get you," Carter sniffled. "Are you coming home?" "We don't like it without you. It's too quiet." I closed my eyes. Damn it. Damn them all. I looked at the 4 powerful men standing in my doorway, men who could tear a city apart but were currently bowing their heads in my run-down hallway, begging an Omega to save their children. "I'll see you in an hour, boys," I said to the phone. "Eat something. That's a promise." I hung up and shoved the phone back into Lincoln's chest. He let out a breath that sounded suspiciously like a sob of relief. "Don't get comfortable," I snapped, pointing a finger at Lincoln's chest. "I'm signing that contract, but I dictate the terms. If I'm doing this, I am the boss of this operation. You listen to me. You do exactly what I say when I say it. You're going to be the most boring polo shirt wearing suburban grill master American dads Beverly Hills has ever seen." "Understood." Lincoln looked at me, a sharp, dangerous, incredibly attractive smile pulling at the corner of his mouth. "Understood, Eli." "Give me 10 minutes to pack," I grumbled, turning around. This was a terrible idea, an absolutely disastrous, catastrophic idea. But as I grabbed my duffel bag and caught the faint scent of cedar and rain drifting in from the hallway, I knew I never really had a choice. The Bel Air estate was exactly as I remembered it, sprawling, pristine, and practically humming with the lethal energy of its inhabitants. It was the kind of house that should have been featured in Architectural Digest, but instead of priceless art pieces, the real centerpieces were the 4 heavily armed men currently standing in a row in the living room, looking like they were facing a firing squad. "No," I said, pinching the bridge of my nose. "Absolutely not. Try again." Sitting on the plush leather sectional behind me, Mason and Carter giggled into their hands. I had appointed them the official judges of the Operation American Dad Boot Camp, a role they were taking very seriously. "What is wrong with this?" Jackson demanded, tugging viciously at the collar of his pastel pink Ralph Lauren polo. The fabric stretched precariously over his broad chest and thick biceps. "I look like I own a yacht. That is Beverly Hills right." "You look like a cartel enforcer who stole a golf instructor's laundry," I shot back, crossing my arms. "And stop flexing. Suburban dads don't flex when they're asking about the PTA bake sale." "I'm not flexing," Jackson muttered, though he clearly was. His scent, usually a sharp, energetic gunpowder, was currently spiked with frustrated ozone. "Let's move on to the practical scenarios," I sighed, pacing in front of them like a highly exasperated drill sergeant. "Harrison, you are at the neighborhood block party. Steve from next door comes over and asks what you do for a living. What do you say?" Harrison adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses. In a navy polo and khakis, he managed to look the most normal out of the 4 of them, provided you didn't look directly into his cold, calculating gray eyes. I informed Steve that I am an independent risk assessment consultant focusing on corporate asset protection. If he pushes for details, I politely deflect by inquiring about his lawn care routine while simultaneously assessing his posture to determine if he is carrying a concealed weapon. "Half a point for the lawn care deflection," I said. 0 points for treating Steve like a hostile combatant. "Wyatt, you're up." Wyatt, the largest of the pack, was wearing a forest green polo that made him look like a very angry, very muscular tree. He had his massive arms crossed, his dark eyes fixed on a spot on the wall like he was trying to set it on fire with his mind. "Steve asks if your family wants to come over for a Sunday barbecue," I prompted. "Your response?" Wyatt blinked slowly. "I decline." "Why?" "Steve's perimeter security is compromised. His fence is only 4 feet high. It's a tactical nightmare. Anyone could snipe us from the street. Also, I don't like Steve." Mason burst into a fresh fit of giggles. "Papa Wyatt is scary." "Papa Wyatt is failing," I corrected, though I was struggling to hide a smirk. I turned to Lincoln. The undisputed leader of the pack was wearing a crisp white polo and tailored chinos. He actually pulled the look off effortlessly, radiating wealthy privilege and raw power. But the dominant energy rolling off him was entirely wrong for a polite preschool interview. He didn't look like a dad, he looked like a king about to order an execution. "Lincoln," I said, "smile." He gave me a sharp, white smile. It was the kind of smile wolves gave right before they went for the throat. "Okay, stop. You're going to make the admissions director cry." I groaned, dragging a hand through my hair. "This is a disaster. You guys are radiating enough lethal intent to clear out a shopping mall. You're supposed to be soft, approachable, boring." "We are not boring men," Eli Lincoln rumbled, his terrifying smile fading into a tight, stressed line. "I know that," I said, my voice softening. "But you have to pretend. For them." I gestured to the twins on the couch. The atmosphere in the living room shifted instantly. The annoyance and awkwardness evaporated, replaced by a suffocating wave of anxiety. Cedar smoke, steel, and rain, the heavy complex tapestry of their pack's scent, turned sharp and bitter. The sheer weight of their collective fear was staggering. They weren't just uncomfortable in polo shirts, they were terrified. Terrified that who they were, what they were, was going to ruin their sons' lives. "We can't do this," Jackson whispered, his broad shoulders slumping as he stared at the floor. "They're going to see right through us. They're going to look at us and know we don't belong in their shiny, safe world. We are going to mess this up for them." Papa Carter asked, his little voice trembling. The boys could feel the sudden distress in the air, their smiles vanishing. My Omega hindbrain roared to life, a primal, undeniable demand to soothe the distressed pack, to protect the pups from their parents' fear. Before I could overthink it, my body moved on its own. I stepped right into Lincoln's space, reaching out to flatten my palms against his broad chest. I could feel his heart thudding rapidly beneath the crisp white cotton. Then I closed my eyes and let my guard down, completely releasing my pheromones. A thick, warm wave of peaches and brown sugar flooded the living room, cutting through the bitter alpha anxiety like sunlight piercing through winter fog. It was heavy sweet and overwhelmingly calming. Lincoln let out a ragged, shuddering breath, his head dropping forward until his forehead rested against mine. "Eli," he breathed the word, vibrating against my skin. His scent of cedar and smoke immediately softened, curling possessively around my sweetness. I kept one hand on Lincoln's chest and reached out with the other. Jackson crowded in immediately, pressing his face into the crook of my neck, inhaling so deeply it sounded like a sob. Wyatt stepped close behind me, a massive, silent presence, his broad hand resting heavily warmly on the small of my back. Harrison moved in beside Lincoln, his hand covering mine where it rested over Lincoln's heart. For a long minute, the five of us just stood there in the middle of the simulated boot camp. The air was thick and syrupy, charged with an intimacy that made my knees weak. My heart hammered, my skin flushed under their combined heat. They were so big, so dangerous, and yet right now they were entirely anchored by me. "Breathe," I murmured, my voice a soft, vibrating purr I didn't entirely recognize as my own. "You aren't going to ruin anything. Tomorrow you are going to walk into that school and you are going to show them that you are the most devoted, stable family in this city. You just have to let me lead. We'll follow you anywhere." Omega Wyatt rumbled softly from behind me, the deep vibration sending a heavy shiver straight down my spine. I swallowed hard, trying to ignore the way my biology preened and melted at the title. Good, because tomorrow Beverly Hills won't know what hit them. Starlight Academy looked less like a preschool and more like a country club for miniature billionaires. As Lincoln pulled the matte black SUV into the circular driveway, I stared out the tinted windows at the sprawling manicured lawns, the state-of-the-art playground equipment that looked like modern art sculptures, and the parents. Oh, the parents. The air outside the car was practically vibrating with the pretentious manicured pheromones of the Beverly Hills elite. I could already smell it seeping through the vents, organic eucalyptus cold-pressed green juice, and the sharp, arrogant scents of tech bro alphas and Lululemon-clad omegas. My own scent peaches and brown sugar felt entirely too thick and unrefined for this zip code. "Okay," I breathed, turning around to face the back seats. Mason and Carter were practically vibrating with excitement, their little hands clutching their matching Starlight Academy admission folders. Remember the plan. We are normal. We are friendly. We do not assess the structural integrity of the jungle gym, Harrison. I make no promises if the load-bearing joints are compromised, Harrison replied smoothly, adjusting his cuffs. And we don't glare at the other parents, I added, shooting a pointed look at Wyatt. Wyatt grunted, his massive chest expanding as he took a deep breath. The scent of earth and storm filled the cabin heavy and defensive. If they maintain a respectful distance, they get to keep their kneecaps. "Lord, give me strength," I muttered, rubbing my temples. "All right, let's go." The moment we stepped out of the SUV, it was like a bomb went off. It wasn't a physical explosion, but a sensory one. The noise of 100 screaming, laughing children, the chaotic swirl of unfamiliar scents, and the sudden overwhelming presence of a massive crowd hit the pack all at once. My four alphas froze. I watched in real time as the polite pastel-wearing suburban dads I had painstakingly crafted evaporated, replaced entirely by lethal, highly trained predators. Their combined pheromones spiked instantly cedar smoke, gunpowder, and steel rolling over the parking lot in a suffocating, aggressive wave. Several parents nearby physically flinched, their heads snapping toward us. "Guys," I hissed, forcing a bright, completely fake smile as I grabbed Carter's hand. "Relax." They did not relax. In fact, their tactical training overrode whatever was left of their conscious brains. Without a single word spoken, they fell into a flawless textbook Secret Service VIP diamond formation. Lincoln took the point. His broad shoulders squared, his eyes scanning the crowd with terrifying intensity. Jackson and Harrison flanked the sides effectively, creating a human wall, while Wyatt took up the rear, his massive frame completely blocking any line of sight from behind. I was trapped dead in the center with the twins. "You have got to be kidding me," I whispered fiercely as we began to march across the playground. "You look like you're escorting the president through a war zone." "Break formation." Negative Jackson murmured, his eyes darting toward a group of toddlers fighting over a sandbox bucket. Too many unknown variables. The perimeter is entirely unsecured. It's a preschool Jackson, not Fallujah. As we navigated the crowded courtyard, the stairs followed us. A tall alpha in a designer suit, clearly someone used to being the most dominant presence in the room, caught my eye. He paused, his gaze dropping to take me in, nostrils flaring slightly as he caught my sweet omega scent. A low, vibrating growl ripped from Lincoln's chest so deep it rattled my teeth. The scent of cedar and smoke turned instantly violent, lashing out like a physical whip. The tech bro alpha went visibly pale, taking a hasty step back and pulling his child behind him. "Stop it," I hissed, reaching forward to pinch the hard muscle of Lincoln's side. Lincoln jolted slightly, glancing back at me with wild, protective eyes. "He was looking at you." "I am wearing a sweater that covers me to the chin." "He was just looking," smile Lincoln. "Now." He forced his lips up, baring his teeth in a way that looked more like a threat display than a greeting. I groaned internally, wrapping my free arm around Mason's shoulders, projecting as much warm, soothing peach scent as I could to counteract the sheer terror my pack was broadcasting. Somehow, without causing an international incident, we made it across the courtyard and into the brightly decorated halls of the main building. "Room 4B, Harrison stated, pointing to a door painted with happy yellow sunflowers. "Ms. Jenkins's classroom." We walked in. The room was aggressively cheerful, smelling of crayons, Elmer's glue, and vanilla. A petite beta woman with kind eyes and a clipboard stood near the front, chatting with a few other parents. She looked up as our convoy entered, her eyes widening comically at the sheer mass of the men filling her doorway. "Oh my goodness," she blinked quickly, composing herself. "You must be the Hayes Cross family. Welcome, please have a seat. The orientation interview will begin shortly." She gestured to a circle of chairs set up in the center of the room. I stopped dead in my tracks. They were kindergarten chairs, tiny molded plastic chairs in primary colors, sitting approximately 12 inches off the floor. I looked at the chairs. Then I looked at the 4 massive, heavily muscled killing machines standing around me. "Sit," I whispered, fighting the hysterical urge to laugh. It was a physical comedy masterpiece. Wyatt, a man built like a brick outhouse, carefully lowered himself onto a bright red plastic chair that groaned in absolute agony beneath his weight. His knees were practically tucked up to his chin. Jackson looked terrified the blue plastic would shatter and send him sprawling, while Harrison sat perched on a yellow chair, his long legs folded awkwardly like a praying mantis. Lincoln took the green chair beside me. He looked completely ridiculous, a king forced to sit on a plastic toadstool, but his thigh pressed warmly against mine. As the rest of the elite parents filtered into the room and took their tiny seats, staring openly at the 4 terrifying men crammed into the pastel furniture, Lincoln leaned in close. His breath ghosted over my ear, smelling of mint and danger. "We made it inside Omega," he murmured. "Now we just have to survive the locals." I looked across the circle at the tech bro alpha from the courtyard, who had just sat down and was currently glaring at us with a mixture of fear and deep-seated arrogance. My stomach plummeted. The physical obstacles were over. The psychological warfare was about to begin. The orientation began with a round of introductions that felt less like a meet and greet and more like a Forbes 500 dick measuring contest. I sat rigidly on my green plastic toadstool, my knees knocking against Lincoln's listening as parents proudly listed their summer homes in the Hamptons, their tech startups, and their philanthropic galas. Ms. Jenkins, the petite beta teacher, smiled and nodded along, clearly used to the thinly veiled arrogance of her clientele. Then it was his turn. The tech bro alpha from the courtyard, whose name was apparently Richard Davis, leaned back in his tiny chair. He was wearing a Rolex that cost more than my brother's entire debt, and his scent was a synthetic cloying mix of bergamot and expensive leather. Well, Richard drawled, his eyes sliding past the 4 terrifying men flanking me to land squarely on my face. "I run a venture capital firm in the Valley, and I have to say it's refreshing to see Starlight Academy opening its doors to such diverse backgrounds this year. His gaze swept over my thrift store sweater, a patronizing smirk playing on his lips. Downtown LA wasn't it. Tell me, Eli, is it? How exactly does one transition from that environment to Bel Air? Did they hire you through an agency? The temperature in the room plummeted. It wasn't a metaphor. The sheer density of the alpha pheromones that exploded from my pack actually seemed to suck the oxygen and the warmth straight out of the brightly colored classroom. Jackson's hands gripped the edge of his blue plastic chair so hard the plastic began to turn white, emitting a perilous squeak. His gunpowder scent turned sharp, sparking with violent static. Beside him, Wyatt didn't move a muscle, but his dark eyes locked onto Richard with the dead, soulless intensity of a predator, calculating the exact trajectory needed to snap a man's neck. "We are private security consultants," Richard Harrison said. His voice was perfectly level, polite, and completely terrifying. His steel gray eyes drifted over Richard's designer suit. "And I would advise you to choose your next words with the same care you put into your portfolio. High-risk investments often yield catastrophic losses." Richard swallowed hard, his patronizing smirk faltering, but his alpha ego was too inflated to back down in front of an audience. "Is that a threat?" he scoffed, puffing out his chest. "Because I happen to sit on the board of this school, and I don't think." "Excuse me, Mr. Richard." The small, polite voice cut through the suffocating tension like a bell. Everyone turned. Mason was sitting cross-legged on the alphabet rug just a few feet away, holding a bright yellow plastic school bus. He looked up at the billionaire tech bro with wide, impossibly innocent brown eyes. "Yes, little boy," Richard asked, trying to recover his composure. "You talk a lot," Mason observed helpfully. Several parents gasped. I slapped a hand over my mouth to physically hold in a laugh, my peach scent spiking with sudden nervous amusement. Mason Lincoln murmured, though he didn't sound particularly reprimanding. "I'm just saying what Papa Wyatt told us." Carter chimed in from beside his brother. He was busy meticulously lining up toy wooden blocks. He didn't even look up as he dropped the verbal bomb. "Papa Wyatt says men who talk too much usually end up with their tongues cut out and put in a shoebox." The silence that descended on room 4B was absolute. You could have heard a crayon drop. "It's a biohazard," Mason added seriously, nodding at Richard. "Papa Harrison says leaving body parts in cardboard compromises the evidence chain. So you should probably be careful, Mr. Richard. Do you have a good shoebox?" Richard Davis turned the color of freshly poured concrete. He physically recoiled, pressing himself so far back into his tiny chair that the backrest groaned. His cloying bergamot scent vanished, replaced entirely by the sour, sharp reek of pure alpha terror. I couldn't help it. A small, muffled laugh escaped my lips. Wyatt's massive chest rumbled with a suppressed, dark chuckle. Jackson openly smirked, the tension bleeding out of his shoulders, while Harrison merely pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose, looking incredibly proud. "Oh my," Ms. Jenkins squeaked, her clipboard clattering against her knee. She looked frantically between the terrified billionaire and the four lethally amused assassins sitting in her kindergarten chairs. Sweating visibly, she desperately lunged for the conversation's steering wheel to avoid a total crash. Children have such vivid imaginations. Ms. Jenkins laughed hysterically. Cartoons these days, right? So much action. Anyway, moving on. Let's talk about family structures. Yes, Starlight Academy prides itself on understanding the home dynamic. She turned her panicked gaze to our group. Mr. Hayes Cross families, you have quite a unique, wonderful setup. For our records, could you elaborate on how the parenting duties are shared? Who takes on the primary caregiver role? She was looking at me, clearly expecting me to play the part of the hired nanny or the overwhelmed step-parent. Before I could open my mouth to recite the carefully rehearsed lie we had practiced in the Bel Air living room, Lincoln shifted on his green toadstool. The movement drew every eye in the room. He didn't look like a suburban dad. He looked like exactly what he was, a king of the underworld, wealthy, ruthless, and entirely in control. He reached out his large, calloused hand, wrapping firmly around my knee. The heat of his touch bled through my denim jeans, sending a heavy liquid shiver straight to my omega core. "There is no division of labor." Ms. Jenkins Lincoln rumbled, his voice a deep, vibrating baritone that resonated in the chest of every omega in the room. He turned his head, locking his dark, intense eyes with mine. The scent of cedar and smoke washed over me, thick with possessive adoration. "We are a pack," Lincoln declared, his thumb tracing a slow circle over my kneecap. He didn't look at the teacher. He didn't look at the board members. He only looked at me. And Eli is not just a caregiver. He is our Omega, the center of our world, the queen of our house. Whatever he wants, we provide. Whatever he commands, we execute. My breath hitched. The entire classroom stared in stunned, captivated silence. My heart hammered wildly against my ribs, and suddenly the plastic chair beneath me didn't feel so ridiculous anymore. If Lincoln's declaration was meant to establish dominance and wrap up the interview, it spectacularly backfired. In the wild, when the pack alpha makes a claim, the subordinates lower their heads. But these four had been living in a tense hormone-fueled stalemate for a week, desperately seeking my approval. Lincoln's public flex didn't trigger their submission, it triggered their competitive instincts. She didn't ask who commands, Lincoln Jackson interjected. He leaned forward on his tiny blue chair, his pastel polo stretching dangerously over his biceps. His gunpowder scent flared sharply, undercutting Lincoln's cedar. She asked about the division of labor. And for the record, Eli eats my cooking. He only likes his eggs sunny side up, and I'm the only one who doesn't burn the edges. I stared at Jackson, my mouth falling slightly open. Are we really doing this right now? Nutritional sustenance is a basic necessity, Jackson. It hardly equates to emotional intimacy. Harrison adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses, his gray eyes flashing with analytical disdain. Eli requires mental stimulation. We spend exactly 45 minutes every morning in the sunroom discussing literature and domestic logistics while I review the perimeter threat assessments. I provide his intellectual anchor. You bore him, Wyatt grunted from his red plastic chair. The massive alpha didn't even look at Harrison. His deep, rumbling voice vibrated the floorboards. I carry the groceries. I fix the sink. I killed that spider in his bathroom on Tuesday. Actions provide security, not talking. I am the leader of this pack. Lincoln growled, a low, vibrating sound in the back of his throat. He wrapped his arm entirely around my waist, pulling me flush against his side. He sits on my lap. He sat on your lap once because Jackson tripped over the rug and knocked him over. Harrison snapped. I was distracted. Jackson defended defensively. The air in room 4B was rapidly deteriorating into a toxic competitive soup of alpha pheromones. Gunpowder, steel earth, and smoke clashed violently, completely drowning out the smell of Elmer's glue and vanilla. It was a literal dick measuring contest disguised as a parenting debate, and they were doing it in front of Beverly Hills' most elite residents. The tech bro, Alpha Richard, looked like he was about to pass out. Several other parents were clutching their pearls or their designer handbags, paralyzed by the sheer, unhinged intensity of the four massive men bickering over a breakfast routine. My face was burning so hot it felt radioactive. My peach scent was practically boiling with absolute soul-crushing mortification. I turned to Ms. Jenkins, fully expecting her to hit a panic button called Child Protective Services, or at the very least, ask us to leave. Instead, I froze. Ms. Jenkins was not panicking. She was not reaching for a phone. Her pupils were massively dilated, her cheeks were flushed, and she was breathing heavily. She had abandoned her official clipboard and pulled a small, thick moleskin notebook from her cardigan pocket. Her hand was moving at lightning speed, a sparkly pink pen flying across the pages. Oh, my Ms. Jenkins breathed, her voice trembling with barely suppressed euphoria. A reverse harem dynamic with an established hierarchy, but heavily layered with domestic competitive tension. The angst potential is staggering. My brain short-circuited. "Excuse me," I choked out. She didn't hear me. She leaned across the kindergarten table, her eyes practically sparkling as she pointed her pink pen at Jackson. "Tell me, Mr. Jackson, when you cook his eggs in the morning, do you wear an apron? Are you wearing a shirt underneath, or just the apron?" "Just the apron," Jackson answered immediately, his chest puffing out with pride. "It's tactical canvas." "Brilliant," Ms. Jenkins whispered, writing furiously. "A juxtaposition of lethal masculinity and domestic servitude. And Mr. Harrison, this intellectual anchor you provide. Does it ever spill over into frustrated longing? Do you look at his lips while he speaks about logistics?" Constantly, Harrison replied deadpan, though a faint flush appeared on his neck. "Are you taking notes for a novel?" I hissed, my eyes darting frantically between the deranged preschool teacher and my idiot pack. "Hush," Omega Lincoln murmured, patting my knee. "The beta is assessing our devotion. Let us prove our worth." "You are proving that you belong in a psychiatric ward," I whispered violently. But it was too late. The alphas, completely missing the absurdity of the situation, were eagerly answering her questions, turning the Starlight Academy orientation into a live-action reading of a smutty fanfiction. I bought him a peach-scented bath bomb, Jackson boasted. I mapped out his optimal sleep cycle, Harrison countered. I bought him a knife, Wyatt stated proudly. That is so romantic, Ms. Jenkins squealed, her sparkly pen a blur. It's really not, I groaned, dropping my face into my hands. And then, because the universe hated me, the children decided to help. Papa Jackson cries when Eli ignores him, Carter announced from the alphabet rug, pausing his block stacking to deliver the tactical strike. Jackson coughed in embarrassment. And they all stand outside Papa Eli's door at night, Mason added helpfully, holding up his yellow school bus, like sad puppies, because Papa Eli locks it. Papa Wyatt actually fell asleep against the wood on Wednesday. He drooled. A collective gasp echoed around the circle of parents. Richard Davis finally fainted, his head slumping forward onto his chest. Ms. Jenkins actually snapped her pink pen in half, letting out a sound that was half squeal, half sob. Oh my God, she wept joyfully. The pining, the exquisite, unrequited pining of lethal predators. That was it. I had reached my absolute limit. I sat up straight. I slammed my hand down on the edge of my green plastic toadstool. I didn't think I'd just let my biology take over. I pulled back every ounce of my sweet, soothing scent, compressing it into a sharp, condensed wave of pure, undeniable Omega command. It wasn't soft. It was the crack of a whip crack. Enough. The word ripped from my throat, vibrating with a frequency that commanded absolute obedience. The effect was instantaneous. 4 heavily armed, terrifying Alpha's men who commanded empires and crushed enemies without blinking snapped their mouths shut, their spines straightened, their hands dropped to their laps. The chaotic, competitive soup of their pheromones vanished instantly, replaced by the scent of total utter submission. They looked straight ahead, perfectly silent, like well-trained soldiers awaiting inspection. The rest of the parents stared at me in horrified awe. I had just effortlessly leashed 4 monsters with a single word. I took a deep breath, smoothing down my thrift store sweater. I plastered on my brightest, most terrifying retail smile and turned back to the hyperventilating teacher. As you can see, Ms. Jenkins, I said sweetly, we are a very passionate, communicative family, but I run a very tight ship. Now I believe we were discussing the arts and crafts curriculum. I had just managed to reestablish a fragile, terrifyingly tense order in room 4B. The alphas were sitting perfectly still on their pastel plastic chairs, eyes forward, radiating absolute submission. Ms. Jenkins was still clutching her moleskin notebook, breathing like she had just run a marathon, but at least the unhinged fan fiction interrogation had stopped. I opened my mouth to smoothly pivot the conversation back to the kindergarten curriculum. And then the world exploded. An ear-splitting mechanical shriek tore through the classroom. The fire alarm, red strobe lights mounted on the ceiling, began flashing violently, casting the room in jarring, nightmarish bursts of crimson. Instantly, the polite, manicured veneer of Beverly Hills evaporated. Total panic erupted. Parents screamed, scrambling over the tiny kindergarten furniture in a blind, terrified stampede toward the single wooden door. Richard Davis, the billionaire tech bro who had tried to intimidate us earlier, literally shoved a petite Omega mother out of his way to get to the exit faster. The air was instantly choked with the sour, sickening stench of mass panic sweat fear and spoiled pheromones. Formation Lincoln roared a sound that shook the windows. In a fraction of a second, the 4 men transitioned from awkwardly seated suburban dads back into an elite lethal security unit. Wyatt snatched Carter from the rug, tucking the boy firmly against his massive chest. Harrison grabbed Mason. They immediately closed ranks around me, creating an impenetrable wall of muscle and bone. But as the crowd surged and the sirens wailed, the formation broke. Jackson didn't move. He was standing frozen near the art supplies, his hands clamped over his ears. His eyes were blown wide, staring at a spot on the wall that wasn't there. The flashing red strobes bathed his face in a horrific bloody light. His scent hit me a second later, and it made my knees buckle. The sharp, energetic smell of gunpowder had turned entirely rancid. It smelled like burning rubber, shattered glass, and the metallic, coppery tang of fresh blood. It was the scent of absolute soul-destroying trauma. Jackson Harrison barked over the sirens, trying to grab his shoulder. Jackson violently flinched, swatting Harrison's hand away with a feral, terrified snarl. He was hyperventilating, backing up until he hit the wall. He is not here. I realized my stomach dropping into my shoes. He is back in the car crash. He is back on the day Savannah died. The siren sounded like ambulances. The screams of the panicked parents sounded like tearing metal. He was drowning in a 4-year-old nightmare, completely paralyzed in the middle of a stampede. "Leave him," Wyatt shouted, shielding Carter from a rushing parent. "We have to get you and the pups out." "No," I screamed back. I didn't think. The Omega imperative, the primal biological demand to heal, to protect, to anchor the pack, swallowed my rational brain whole. I shoved past Lincoln's heavy arm and threw myself through the chaotic crowd, dodging terrified billionaires until I slammed into Jackson. "Jackson," I yelled, grabbing the sides of his face. His skin was ice cold and clammy. His pupils were dilated so wide his eyes looked entirely black. "She's bleeding." Jackson choked out his voice, a broken, hollow rasp. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking right through me. "I can't, the door is stuck." "She's bleeding." "Jackson, look at me," I commanded. I didn't use the sharp whip like Omega tone from earlier. I used everything else. I dug deep into the core of my biology, unlocking the floodgates of my scent glands. I pushed out a massive, suffocatingly thick wave of peaches and warm brown sugar. I compressed it, wrapping it entirely around Jackson like a heavy weighted blanket, aggressively fighting the sour stench of his panic. "You are here," I said, fiercely pressing my forehead against his. I anchored my hands in his hair, forcing him to feel my physical warmth, my heartbeat, my reality. "Savannah is not here. You are in Los Angeles. The boys are right behind us, and they are safe. I am here. Smell me, Jackson. Breathe me in." He dragged in a ragged, shuddering breath. The overwhelming sweetness of my scent hit his olfactory glands violently, short-circuiting his panic response. Jackson blinked. The terrifying void in his eyes shattered. He looked at me, really looked at me as a tear spilled over his lashes and tracked through the sweat on his cheek. "Eli," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I've got you, I promised," keeping one hand firmly anchored on the back of his neck. "But right now, I need you to be a soldier. I need you to get us out of here. Can you do that?" Jackson took one more deep breath of peach and sugar. His spine straightened. The rancid smell of burning rubber vanished, replaced by the sharp, electric spark of gunpowder. The lethal predator was back online. "Yes, Omega," he rumbled. He wrapped a massive arm around my waist, physically lifting me off my feet, and plunged us back into the center of the diamond formation. "Move," Lincoln commanded. What followed was a masterclass in tactical extraction. The hallway was a bottleneck of screaming, pushing parents. Lincoln took the point. He didn't push anyone. He simply let out a low, terrifyingly dominant alpha roar that vibrated the walls. The stampeding parents instantly froze their biology, forcing them to yield to the apex predator in the room. "Walk to the exits," Lincoln commanded, his voice slicing through the sirens. "Do not run." The crowd actually listened, parting like the Red Sea. We moved swiftly down the hall. Suddenly, a little girl, Richard Davis's daughter, who had been abandoned in her father's cowardly sprint for the door, was knocked to the floor by the rushing crowd wailing in terror. Harrison didn't miss a beat. Keeping Mason secured on one hip, he smoothly scooped the sobbing girl up with his free arm, his cold gray eyes scanning the ceiling for structural damage. We reached the end of the corridor, but the double-fire doors were jammed, warped by the sheer crush of bodies that had tried to hit the panic bar all at once. Several parents were trapped against it, weeping in defeat. "Clear," Wyatt barked. The parents scrambled back. Wyatt, still holding Carter, didn't bother looking for a latch. He simply lifted his heavy combat boot and kicked the center of the reinforced steel doors. The impact sounded like a bomb going off. The metal frame buckled inward, the safety glass shattered into a million pieces, and the doors flew off their hinges, crashing onto the pavement outside. Jackson took the lead, kicking the shattered debris out of the way to create a safe path for the parents to follow. Within 90 seconds of the alarm sounding, we were standing on the manicured front lawn of the academy. Smoke was billowing from one of the far art rooms, a kiln fire, not a structural threat, but dangerous enough. The scene on the lawn was chaotic. Paramedics were arriving, parents were hyperventilating, and children were crying. But our pack stood in perfect silent formation under a large oak tree. Mason and Carter were completely unfazed, safely tucked into the massive arms of Harrison and Wyatt. I stood in the center, my hands trembling slightly as the adrenaline began to wear off. Suddenly, Jackson shifted. He dropped his head, bearing his face directly into the crook of my neck, right over my scent gland. He inhaled deeply, a long, shuddering breath that vibrated against my collarbone. Slowly, his large hand reached out his fingers, intertwining tightly with mine. I squeezed his hand back, releasing a soft, steady pulse of brown sugar to keep him grounded. I looked up to see Ms. Jenkins walking toward us. She wasn't holding her notebook anymore. She was holding a clipboard, her face smudged with soot. Behind her stood Richard Davis, looking thoroughly ashamed as Harrison gently deposited his daughter back into his arms. Ms. Jenkins stopped a few feet away, her eyes moving over the 4 terrifying men who had just saved half the kindergarten class without breaking a sweat. She looked at Jackson, who was currently hiding his face in my neck, and then she looked at me. She didn't look like a deranged fan fiction writer anymore. She looked at us with absolute undeniable respect. "Well, Mr. Hayes," cross Miss Jenkins breathed, pushing her glasses up her soot-stained nose. "I must say you certainly run a very tight ship." The all clear from the fire department sounded 20 minutes later. It was just a faulty kiln in the art wing, nothing serious but enough to thoroughly traumatize the elite parents of Beverly Hills. As the crowd slowly began to filter back into the building to collect their designer bags and ruined pride, the headmaster of Starlight Academy approached our pack. He was a distinguished silver-haired beta, flanked closely by a still smudged, starry-eyed Ms. Jenkins. The headmaster cleared his throat, looking at the 4 massive alphas who were still standing in a loose defensive perimeter around me and the twins. "Mr. Hayes Cross, I believe we've seen enough today. In my 20 years at this academy, I have never witnessed such extraordinary crisis management." "Just protecting our own headmaster," Lincoln said smoothly. His scent was completely controlled again, back to the crisp, wealthy cedar and smoke that commanded boardrooms. "Yes, well," the headmaster offered a tight, polite smile. "Your family's dedication is undeniable. We would be honored to welcome Mason and Carter to Starlight Academy." Mason cheered softly, hiding his face in Harrison's shoulder. Carter gave a serious tiny nod from Wyatt's arms. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding since we left my rundown apartment in downtown LA. We had done it. We had successfully scammed the most elite preschool in California. "Thank you," I said, offering my best, softest Omega smile. Ms. Jenkins leaned in as we turned to leave. She didn't look at the alphas, she looked directly at me, her eyes dropping briefly to where Jackson's large hand was still tightly intertwined with mine. "Your secret is safe with me, Eli," she whispered, her voice vibrating with suppressed writer glee. "And if you ever need a beta reader for anything, you have my email." I blinked terrified and quickly dragged my pack toward the parking lot. The ride back to Bel Air was entirely different from the ride there. There was no tension. There was no aggressive, suffocating soup of defensive pheromones. The adrenaline crash had hit the alphas hard, leaving behind a heavy, profoundly intimate quiet. Mason and Carter were exhausted, both of them passing out before we even hit Sunset Boulevard. They were slumped against Wyatt in the far back, the massive alpha looking down at them with a softness that completely contradicted the lethal weapons strapped to his body. In the middle row, I sat wedged between Harrison and Jackson. Harrison was quiet, his head leaning back against the leather headrest, but his hand rested casually on my knee, his thumb tracing absent soothing circles over my denim jeans. Jackson hadn't let go of my hand. He sat close, his shoulder pressed firmly against mine. His scent of gunpowder was completely calm, now spiked with a deep, lingering exhaustion. Every few minutes, he would lift our joined hands, pressing a soft, silent kiss to my knuckles before resting them back on his thigh. I looked out the tinted window at the passing palm trees, my heart doing complicated, painful gymnastics in my chest. The mission is over, my rational brain whispered. You played the part. You got the boys into the school. You earned the money. It's time to go back to reality. But as I breathed in the air of the cabin, cedar smoke rain, steel earth, and gunpowder all wrapped flawlessly around my own peach and brown sugar, I realized the terrifying truth. I didn't want the severance package. I didn't want my crappy apartment. I didn't want to be the hired help anymore. I had spent the last 3 hours pretending to be the center of their world, pretending to be the Omega Queen of a ruthless pack. But the devotion in their eyes hadn't been acting. The way they fought for me, the way they submitted to my command, the way they fell apart and let me put them back together, it was all devastatingly real. Lincoln pulled the matte black SUV through the massive iron gates of the Bel Air estate. The tires crunched over the gravel driveway, coming to a smooth stop in front of the sweeping front steps. We're home, Lincoln murmured, cutting the engine. Wyatt and Harrison carried the sleeping twins inside, bypassing the living room entirely to take them straight upstairs to their beds. I stood in the massive marble-floored foyer, suddenly feeling incredibly small. The house was quiet. The contract was fulfilled. I clutched the strap of my thrift store bag, waiting for the awkward dismissal, waiting for Lincoln to offer me a ride back to downtown LA. Lincoln stood near the front door. He slowly took off his tailored suit jacket, tossing it over a chair. He rolled up the sleeves of his crisp white shirt, revealing the dark ink of his tattoos and the thick, corded muscle of his forearms. Jackson stepped up beside him. A moment later, Wyatt and Harrison came down the stairs, their footsteps silent on the marble. The four of them formed a loose semicircle around me. They didn't look like awkward suburban dads anymore. They looked like the dangerous, beautiful monsters they were. And they were all looking at me. Well, I started my voice betraying a slight tremor. I forced a laugh, trying to keep it light. Mission accomplished. Beverly Hills thinks we're just an extremely intense, slightly codependent family of overachievers. I guess my work here is done. Nobody laughed. Harrison pushed his glasses up his nose. Technically, Eli, the contract stipulates a 3-month acting period to ensure the school doesn't conduct any surprise follow-up evaluations. Screw the contract, Wyatt grunted. The massive man took a step forward, his dark eyes locking onto mine. I'm not pretending anymore. Neither am I, Jackson said softly. He stepped into my space, reaching out to gently tuck a stray lock of hair behind my ear. His fingers were warm. I meant what I said in that tiny plastic chair, Eli. You eat my cooking. You fix us. You anchored me today when I was drowning in the dark. I'm not letting you walk out that door. My breath hitched. The heavy, sweet scent of peaches began to flood the foyer, betraying my skyrocketing heart rate. Guys, it was a job. You hired me to play a part. No, Lincoln rumbled. The pack alpha stepped forward, the sheer gravity of his presence forcing the other three to part slightly. He stopped inches from me. He reached out his large, calloused hands, cupping my face with a gentleness that was entirely at odds with his lethal reputation. I hired you because my house was a graveyard without you. Lincoln confessed, his dark eyes burning into mine. The scent of cedar and smoke wrapped around me, thick with absolute undeniable possession. I hired you because my sons were crying for the only Omega who ever made them feel safe. I hired you because my pack was tearing itself apart without its heart. A single tear slipped down my cheek. Lincoln caught it with his thumb. There is no fake marriage, Eli, Lincoln whispered, lowering his head until his forehead rested against mine, just like I had done for Jackson. There is no acting. You are our Omega. You command this pack, and we are going to spend the rest of our lives proving to you that you belong right here. I let out a ragged, shuddering breath. The last defensive wall around my heart crumbled into dust. I looked at Harrison, at Wyatt, at Jackson, and finally into Lincoln's eyes. I saw my future in all of them. I reached up, wrapping my hands gently around Lincoln's wrists, letting my biology completely surrender to the bond. Okay, I whispered, smiling through my tears, but Jackson is still the only one allowed to cook the eggs. A deep collective rumble of relief and joy vibrated from the chests of the 4 terrifying assassins. Jackson let out a triumphant cheer. Wyatt rolled his eyes with a fond smirk, and Harrison sighed in mild offense. Lincoln just smiled, a real breathtaking smile that belonged only to me. He pulled me flush against his chest, wrapping his arms around me to hold me tightly against his heartbeat. Welcome home, Omega, Lincoln murmured into my hair. For good.